Bitcoin is going to become ubiquitous, right? I think I just seen a post on X earlier today where Trump's pretty much announcing that the old financial system is about to stop. He's shutting it down and he's going everything on the blockchain. So that's going to force the layman and the laywoman now to say, okay, I'm getting a paycheck or whatever. What's the blockchain? What is this? Let me Google what this means.
Like this lady, she was like super involved with Bitcoin, she and her husband. And I think they had like a son who was like 18, 19, and he wanted nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
So it's like, what do you do in that situation? You shouldn't ask kids what do they want to be when they grow up. You should ask kids or people what problems do they want to solve. Like what's something you want to solve, because it creates a different, reaction from them to think about.
For sure. Chores are something that people use as a form of responsibility. But when your kid is like in that preteen age from like 8 to 12, they want to start doing things. They want to be a part of the family structure. And, everything is going to start to lay back to, you want something for Christmas? Okay, perfect. If you want that, tell me if that company is on the stock market. Oh, you want Mattel? You want a Barbie doll? Mattel. Let's go find Mattel on the stock market. How much is that stock worth? And then we're going to start to get into the Bitcoin situation where we'll start asking, like, is Mattel buying Bitcoin? Is Mattel have Bitcoin on their balance sheet? And you start to bring these questions into play, because whatever they're in love with, Barbie dolls, cars, whatever, something's public, something's being traded on the market. And then you can also flip that back to Bitcoin, because all these companies ultimately are going to flip to Bitcoin at some point.
Now, the funny thing is, for Satoshi, since we started off with this book, she recognizes the monsters as Satoshi.
Yeah.
Which is fine. At her age, I'll take it. How has Bitcoin changed how you're raising your daughter?
100%. So how I'm raising her is, I guess you could say, like, I'm very.
What's the first thing your child ever asked you about with like money?
Can I have some? That's the first thing she said. Can I have some? I said, what?
I love it. Let me tell you exactly what you'll get if you subscribe to Raising Satoshi. Each video you'll hear from real parents, real educators, not influencers, not experts, just everyday people trying to figure out how to explain Bitcoin to their kids. And the best part of all, we keep it simple. No complicated charts, no confusing language, just real conversations that you can actually understand and use. You'll even walk away with things that you can try at home. How to explain Bitcoin to your kids, how to talk about savings. You'll also hear the real moments, the funny questions, the confusion, sometimes my daughter interrupting the interview, and of course, the wins. So if you ever thought, am I too late? How do I start? What if I'm still learning myself? Then this is for you. Subscribe to Raising Satoshi, and each video will give you simple, real ways to start building a better financial future for your family. One conversation at a time, one lesson at a time, one sat at a time. What up? I am Tima, one half of the Jump Out Girls, and I am so honored to be here with Dadu. Welcome to Raising Satoshis.
What's up, Tima? I'm so excited to be here. Yes.
Yeah, so Dadu, this is such an honor because you were literally the first person to interview us when we first started. And, just to repay this back and be able to interview is just like unsurreal. Like, I can't believe it.
Likewise. I've always been a follower of the Jump Out Girls, and everything that you gals do is just dope, and I just think that it's authentic, and that's what the world is lacking right now, is just authentic people. And now that you're a mom, it's like even better. It's like the evolution of Tima. So I'm excited to have this conversation today.
I know it's so different now, right? It's crazy. But basically, like, could you just tell a little bit about yourself? Introduce yourself to the audience. You and your family.
Most definitely, and I'm gonna try to not pontificate, because I've done so much in this space. I don't want to be, I got that,
I know.
I got that Leo energy, so people think that I come off like I'm cocky and stuff, right? So, my name is Daru Amintana. I started in Bitcoin in 2017, way back when I was a financial banker. An engineer at the time approached me about Bitcoin, and she was like, "Yeah, buy $10 worth. This would change your life." At the time, I was like, she's bugging. This is not true. I was like a gold bug guy at the time. So a few years flew by. And then ironically, when my daughter was born in 2020, that's when the light bulb went off, and I was like, okay, I got to
Mm.
get some savings. I got to get serious. I was like, let me look at this
Yeah.
Bitcoin I had. The $10 turned into like I think $100 at the time. My banker brain
Yeah.
was like, okay, no stock is doing this, no bond is doing this. What is this? I go and buy Saifedean's book, the Bitcoin
Hmm.
Standard, and then it
Yeah.
it was off to the races from there. Black Bitcoin billionaires, interviewing people, doing a whole bunch of different stuff.
Yeah, I didn't want to do it like an intro for you because it would have been too long. I'm like, he's an author, he's a
Yeah,
writer, he does this for the space, he's done stuff for us, he's an editor. Like, it's just too much. But yeah, I think, similar to you, when I first like heard about Bitcoin, it's just kind of like if the light bulb, not everybody's light bulb goes off like immediately. But I think for me, when I jumped in, because I jumped in like during a bull run, it was just like, oh my God, what is going on? I have to learn more about this. So for me, I'm gonna be honest, like price drew me initially to Bitcoin. Initially.
yep.
Obviously, that's not where I'm at now, right? Because you go through the rabbit holes of Bitcoin. So like what drew you to Bitcoin? I know you mentioned the banker, you were working and a lady
Yeah.
told you about it, but like what really like convinced you to like hop on, jump on?
Yeah, so what really drew me in, it wasn't even really the price or anything. Like me being a millennial, I just think that we
Mhm.
went through a lot of hardship finance wise. And I was like, I'm looking for freedom. I'm looking for something that can put me in a position generationally that will allow my daughter that she doesn't have to work as hard as we've worked or work as hard as our
Yeah,
parents worked, the Gen Xers or the baby boomers. So I'm kind of looking at it from a long term play. I know enough about it to understand that if you didn't get in 2011 when it was a penny, you're probably not going to be uber rich right now. But, when you're looking at an asset that
right.
over the last decade, 200% increase, lately it's been like 20% year over year, give or take. That's still good odds compared to
Mhm.
buying Apple stock or something like that. So I would say freedom for sure. That's kind of why I've done so much of the work that I've done, going to underserved communities, going back to my people and saying, hey, look, this is something that we need to learn about, whether I have to write about it, podcast about it, shout from the rafters in the neighborhoods about it. Like that's always been my mission, is just to become free and also to free other people that look like me from my community.
Yeah. And that's a great point just because we understand more, I think, about becoming unbanked and how marginalized communities basically we suffer the most when it comes to like the banking industry and the financial, world that Bitcoin just makes a lot more sense for us. And I've found in our journey that explaining Bitcoin to the marginalized community is a lot easier because
Mhm.
we understand like what it feels like not to have. You know what I mean?
100%. And also it's easy, but it's also hard too. And I'm sure you can relate to this, where it's like some people just don't want to accept the information, or they have been bombarded by so much systematic, whether it's racism,
Yeah.
classism, economic, turmoil. It can become like a laborious process to really educate people and say like, man, why am I doing this? Because these black folk don't want to listen. We got that kind of mentality sometimes, and it's like you have to look at the beauty of it, where yes, maybe people don't listen, but you don't know how people are receiving that information. And this is why I'm really excited about this podcast in particular, because the youth is the future. And if someone could have told us about this when we were 10 or 9 or 8, it didn't exist then. But if they could, and we could sit back and say, hey, our mom or our dad is learning about Bitcoin, and they're setting us up now so that when we do have the brain to understand finances and basic economics, we already have a step up, because of course this is a finite asset. There's only 21 million. So by the time
Right.
most of these kids become of age,
Yeah.
like so much of this is going to be grabbed up by ETFs or different corporations, that we don't want to be the last at the table like we've been for generations. So the things that you're doing, Tima, is super commendable, and I'm honored to be on the show.
Yeah, I'm so happy. I think also too, like since the suits are in, I call them the suits,
Yeah.
you could definitely see the difference between like the last, I would say 2 years. You just hear more about different companies, different banks, banks that originally said that Bitcoin was a scam and it was a Ponzi scheme are now buying Bitcoin. And, Fidelity, Bank of America, the list just goes on and on. While I think it's great, I think that the issue I see most now is just with retail, right? And it's just like, it's still a lot of people who don't know about Bitcoin, but at the same time, it's just like it's harder now to explain it because now you have a political kind of like standpoint with Bitcoin now. It's becoming more like a, it's not becoming more political, but I tell people don't let your political views influence your money, right? So it's like when you mention Bitcoin, they'll mention something else with it. And I'm just like, that's not what it was intended for. You know what I mean? Don't worry about the suits that are in Bitcoin. Worry about what it can do for you.
100%. And what people don't realize too, because we're really geeks for this asset, is like
Mhm.
90% of the asset is not owned by the suits. So,
No,
a lot,
no,
a lot of people are just seeing it because they're in the news more and they're kind of doing these massive buys. Oh, Sailor bought a hundred
right.
thousand Bitcoin. So like that's going to be news fodder for people. But realistically, the cyberpunks and the people that were doing this when no one believed in it are the biggest holders of Bitcoin. So that should give you some hope for sure that there's still time and there's still room for people coming from our community to still buy in. And I did some numbers, and if you were to divide all the Bitcoin with all the people on the planet, it's like 8 billion people or something.
Mhm.
You'd
Mhm.
you each person would get $256 worth of Bitcoin.
Wow.
So it's like if you got $500 in Bitcoin right now, you're already ahead of billions of people. And there's people that don't have banks, don't have internet, that you're ahead of people, even if you don't have that much. So I always tell people, like, don't look at the price as much. Don't look at how much you've amassed as much. Of course, we want to all get to one Bitcoin, but
Mm-hmm.
you'll be surprised as the price goes up, you're going to see that like a small amount is going to be worth so much. Everyone's going to want to have that amount from
Yeah.
you. So
Yeah. And I think also too it's like the media. The media has a great job of influencing and the propaganda that they put out that you would think that I had someone say to me the other day, like, well, hasn't Sailor bought all the Bitcoin? And I'm just like, no, like, but that's because the media, and even the media being X, Twitter, Instagram, like, you can't help but go when you go on there, you can't help but to see what strategy has purchased, what BlackRock has purchased, what, I'm trying to think of the other ones. Like it's also you forget about like the cyberpunks, you forget about the people who've been in there since 2010 and 2011 just because it's being hyper focused on these people who are more of a caliber of like they fit the narrative of what the media wants to see.
100%. And
Yeah.
the media is very powerful. So I'll give you a good story, team. So uh sometimes I'll go and teach the youth at this it's kind of like a nonprofit. It's called Strong Young Minds, but it's really based around teenagers.
Okay.
And I would teach them like financial literacy and Bitcoin courses. They love it. I use shows like the Tuttle Twins, and just kind of telling them and giving them like, what are you guys seeing on social media? What are you guys and gals seeing on the internet that's talking about Bitcoin? We're still getting I think it's a scam. I mean, these are 14 and 15-year-olds, right?
Hmm.
But they all have Cash App, and I'm like, oh, you have Cash App? I said, Bitcoin is intertwined into Cash App. You know that, right? Oh yeah, let me see. I showed them. I'm like, look, there's even systems now where Cash App is really realizing the power of the youth, and they're allowing teenagers to have bank accounts. They're allowing teenagers to buy Bitcoin, of course, with the parents' approval. But
Hmm.
these are things that I did not have as a teenager in 2000, 2001, or whatever. So it's like the world is changing at a rapacious rate, and it's like we have to be the educators now. We have to be the people to say, hey, look, if my mom, back in the days for us, like if our mom and dad bought 100 shares of the S&P 500 when we were 10 and let it sit until we were 21, like we wouldn't be trying to
Right.
fill out FAFSAs. And you know what I mean? Like we'd be in a different position. So I
No.
want that. I want that for my daughter,
We
and I
wouldn't
want to
even be
see.
thinking about
Yeah,
school.
yeah, exactly. We wouldn't. Well, you might want to go to school. You might just want to be educated, but you wouldn't have that pressure, right? Like, oh my goodness, like I have to spend the next 4 years eating ramen noodles, and because I gotta make sure I have tuition for my books. But what I'm trying to get at
Yeah.
is that um, our kids are, they call them Generation Alpha or whatever, and it's like they're going to be in a completely different world. Like
Mhm.
AI is set to take 90% of the jobs in the next decade. So what are our kids going to do? Like, shoot, what are we going to do? Because we're not that old. We still going to have to be working.
Yeah.
So it's like these are the things that I constantly think
Right.
about. And that's why I'm like, oh, team is helping out the children. Like, how can I be a part of this? How can I help? And this is just a beautiful thing, and I hope that this becomes like a trend. Like, okay, we have more parents, more people that are helping the community talking about this stuff, because I think this is the side of Bitcoin a lot of people don't really know about or kind of elucidate on.
Yeah. And so, like, when you were teaching those kids, even before you had your daughter, like for me, I know when I first learned about Bitcoin, the hardest thing for me to understand was blockchain. So
Hmm.
when I had my daughter, I bought a book, and it's not down here. Oh, I do have it. I would go get it, but it's basically it's called Blockchain for Babies. I can see it.
Yeah.
Blockchain for Babies. And they basically explain how blockchain works. So I would just read that to her, and honestly it helped me. But like when you first started with Bitcoin, like what was that kind of like moment where it's just like, oh, this is kind of confusing, or I need a little bit more, I need to read a little bit more, understand it a little bit more to understand how Bitcoin worked. And then how did you use that to explain it to your daughter?
Okay, so if people don't know, like I come from those BBB, Black Bitcoin billionaire rooms back in the days with Lamar Wilson. So when I was initially learning, I would just live on Clubhouse. Me, Dr.
Yeah.
Shalair, Naja Roberts, the whole list goes on of all the, the OGs in the space now. And
Yeah.
it was just kind of breaking it down into ones and zeros. And I look at it as like a conveyor belt, right? Like the blockchain is a conveyor belt that's pushing out. We could use marbles, we could use potatoes, anything that would relate to a kid. And every 10
Right.
minutes, a new marble comes out, right?
Mm,
And in order for you to determine that that marble is a real marble, it has to get approved by someone. So every 10 minutes, they
mm,
approve it. And if that person doesn't approve it within that 10 minutes, you get a delay, but then you also get a rejection where this is not a real marble because we didn't have anyone to prove it. So I use like those kind of analogies to help with the kids and they like understand it better. But I would say, to answer
mhm.
your question, Tima, how I really got good at it was just learning a little bit from people like Lamar and from yourselves
Mm,
as well as the Jump Out Girls, and then just
right.
relaying that information, because the only way you know that you retain the information is if you teach it to somebody else. So I
Yeah.
would just go out there, and I was a big writer at the time, so a lot of the writing was helping me to educate myself and other people, because when I would put these articles out, people would ask questions and say like, how is this true? Or how does this side of the technology work? What's a hash? What is SHA-256? Like all these little
Right.
questions, and then I would have to elaborate on them to
Yeah.
make sure that I don't look crazy when I write things.
Someone asked, I was participating in this space. I don't think they have anymore, but it was but the Nigerian Women Bitcoin group,
Hmm.
and they were having them every Sunday. And somebody asked me what was the meme pool, and
Hmm.
I had no idea.
Oh,
Even though,
really?
but listen to how crazy this is. On my phone, I have it as a tab.
Hmm.
And I know I look at it. I know I've been to it. It's on my phone, like it was in my browser tabs, and
Yeah.
I'm just like, wow. Like the learning is like you're forever learning about Bitcoin, and it's just like sometimes like you can focus on different things, but it's just like that one question. It like really stumped me for a second, and I was just like, oh wow. And it's even more embarrassing that I had it on a tab in my phone, and I was like, I didn't even like connect the dots. But yeah, I think, when you're, especially when you're writing and you're kind of like explaining it, I think that's a great way to explain it to other people. And obviously, when you're teaching and you're talking about it, and, people ask you questions, because people have asked questions that I've had it like what happened to me less than a month ago. And it's like, it just helps you kind of educate yourself more, because there's so many different questions you get about Bitcoin. There's so many different things that's going on that it's kind of like it's a forever learning process.
100%. And there's going to be more questions that we don't have answers to, right? Like
Yeah,
we
yeah,
we got the basics down for sure. But wait till our kids start to ask questions, because in my mind, in my opinion, that Bitcoin is going to become ubiquitous, right? It's going to become. I think I just seen a
right,
post on X earlier today where Trump's pretty much announcing that the old financial system is about to stop. He's shutting it down,
yeah,
and he's going
yep,
everything on the blockchain. So that's going to
mhm,
force the layman and the laywoman now to say, okay, I'm getting a paycheck or whatever. What's the blockchain? What is this? Let me Google what this means. And
right,
then they're
right,
they're also going to start looking for outlets, podcasts, videos, lectures,
mhm,
what is
Hmm.
this? So this is good because they're gonna
Yeah.
hopefully stumble on a video like this and say, hey, what are these? What's his brother and this sister talking about? Let's figure out
Right.
what they're
Right.
talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, because what I've noticed over like my Bitcoin journey that everyone always talks about their Bitcoin journey, which is great. And for those who have children or those who have adopted children or who have nieces or nephews or cousins or anybody that you have included in your next phase of life to pass down something, I don't really hear a lot of people talk about one outside of like the Tuttle twins, the Shamori, I can't think of their names right now, but outside of these like specific groups, like they have specific products that are geared towards teaching children about Bitcoin. So I'm pretty sure, I don't want to assume, but I'm pretty sure like in their own household, they're doing that with their children, right?
Mhm.
But a lot of other Bitcoiners that are pretty active in the space that have different podcasts or different things, nobody's really talking about how their that transition happens. What do they do? What's the plan? How do you even do it? Like, how do you even get that conversation started? So it was like that was like kind of like the inspiration of starting this series is just because I wanted to know how people are having those type of conversations because being that you and I still have young children, we still have a lot of time to influence them and to teach them. So it's just like, I think it'd just be interesting to hear how that's happening and I'm interested to find out if it's not even happening at all. Like if people are going to be honest and just say my kid's not interested in it because I did a space one time and a lady who had I think I'll notice it more in older kids, like if you have like a teenager or like a young adult because like this lady she was like super involved with Bitcoin, she and her husband, and I think they had like a son who was like 18, 19, and he wanted nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
So it's like, what do you do in that situation? Like if that's your only kid, right? Like,
Mhm.
so you're just gonna live off your Bitcoin and just like, hey, maybe they'll come around, but I don't know. It's just, things to think about.
Yeah, most definitely. And you know what I love too is that yourself and Charmaine, when you
Hmm.
guys had the other outlet, you were doing like I think Bitcoin is like an icing on the cake, right? So if you're
Right,
teaching your kid about life insurance, you're teaching your kid about
right,
stocks, strong
right.
portfolio, all these things, and then you kind of put Bitcoin on top of it. So for like that 19-year-old, I think the parent just has to go into what is that kid passionate about? Is he like a sneakerhead?
Right.
Is he into video
Yeah.
games? Like, is he into sports?
Hmm.
And then look at what Yusuf's doing with the Bitcoin Classic. Like, if that kid's into
Right.
basketball, that's the guy that you need to connect him with, and then he'll open his eyes to seeing like all these things that you're seeing is a base layer of Bitcoin, right? All the things that you
Right.
find fun and interesting, at the end of the day, you can always tie this back to economics and technology. So, for the people out there with teenagers, you just have to relate to them. When I speak to Strong Young Minds, I ask them, like, what type of hip hop are you guys listening to? And they'll rattle off
Hmm.
names, NBA Youngboy, this, that, the third. And I said, well, have you guys and gals ever looked into his recording contracts or his deals that he's making? Is he accepting crypto? Is
Hmm.
he accepting any kind of promotions in crypto? And you'd be surprised that these artists are not talking about it on the record, but behind the scenes, their managers, their assistants, the people that know or are more privy than them, they're actually saying, hey, you need to take
Sure.
this deal. So I have a funny story, team, really quickly. And I don't know if
Hmm.
everybody's know about my show, The Bitcoin Source, but I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts. You know, I had the ability and the blessing to actually grow up with the rap artist Benzino, his son. I'm actually really good friends with the whole Benzino's family, right? So his son is his daughter,
Oh,
Coyle
wow.
Ray. Coyle Ray is big famous now too. But his son, his
Yeah.
oldest son, Ray
Yeah.
Jr.,
Yeah.
me and him are very close. We grew up around, the same neighborhood. And I've talked to him from time to
Yeah.
time.
Okay.
He's been in the music industry for a long time. His dad was the owner of the Source magazine, like big time, right?
Right. Right.
And he talked
Hmm.
about how he would get brand deals and he would get these crypto deals that they would just approach rappers and say, "Hey, you have 1 million people on TikTok that follow you. You have 100,000 people on Instagram that follow you. We just need you to place
Hmm.
this in the background, or we need you to wear a certain T-shirt with Bitcoin on it." And they would get these deals. So I
Wow.
would kind of relay this to teenagers and say, like, all these corporations, all these businesses, they're all about marketing and advertising. And you want to be
Hmm.
the people, we want to be the people that are creating the wave and not riding the wave, because that's what we've been doing our whole lives. We get marketed to and then we buy the products that they kind of place in front of us, but we're the ones with all the talent. We're the ones with all the drive that makes these products work. So if no one's wearing Michael Jordans in these so-called low-class neighborhoods, how much money would Michael Jordan really make? So I kind of relate to them in that
Right.
way, and then they start to get it
Yeah.
like, oh, that makes sense.
Right. So then how do you relate it to your daughter? Just because I mean, she's probably heard about it. She's watched you do your interviews. She's seen what
Hmm.
you write. I mean, I'm pretty sure she's probably a better writer than me by now. But like how do you relate Bitcoin and to speak to her about it? Because they still are young. I
Hmm.
think I don't think that they'll understand the aspects of the finite details of the technology, but I think they understand the aspects of the peer to peer, and the perspective of cutting out a middle person.
Hmm.
But I'm interested to hear how you do that with her.
Yeah, that's a great question, Tima. So, and you might be able to relate to this as well. It's really just the exposure, right? So, the fact that my daughter's seeing me talk to all these different people about Bitcoin, we read Bitcoin stories. We're just having low level conversations about Bitcoin, right? She'll say like, "My dad works on
Yeah,
Bitcoin," but she can't elaborate to me what Bitcoin is. But she knows it's
right.
something, right? She knows that it's something important that I'm working on all the time. So that's already getting the wheels spinning, right? She's only 5, so she still has a lot of
Mm-hmm.
time, but I think that I've already put the bug in her ear of like there's kids that when you say Bitcoin, they're like, that doesn't even make like they can't even equate what that is, right? So just
You
the
have no
fact that you
idea.
say, yeah, you say Bitcoin and they're like, oh, like I've heard that before, or my mom's read me a story in regards to that before, that gets the wheels spinning. And then by the time they're a little older, I personally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to equate Bitcoin with chores, right? So chores are
Mm-hmm.
something that people use as a form of responsibility, but when your kid is like in that preteen age from like 8 to 12, they want to start doing things, they want to be a part of the family structure, and everything is going to start to lay back to, okay, what is, you want something for Christmas? Okay, perfect. If you want that, tell me if that company is on the stock market. Oh, you want Mattel? You want a Barbie doll? Mattel. Let's go find Mattel on the stock market. How much is that stock worth? And then we're going to start to get into
Yeah,
the Bitcoin
right.
situation where we'll start asking, like, is Mattel buying Bitcoin? Is Mattel have Bitcoin on their balance sheet? And you start to bring these questions into play because whatever they're in love with,
Yes,
Barbie dolls, cars, whatever, something's
right.
public, something's being traded on the market, and then you can also flip that back to Bitcoin because all these companies ultimately are going to flip to Bitcoin at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think for me, so we started off like when we first had our daughter was books. Like books were
Hmm.
like so integral. I think you really pushed us with that,
Hmm.
like just your vocabulary, just everything about, when we first met you, because
Yeah.
the beauty of this relationship is I met you before I had my daughter.
Yep.
So it's just like, there's different things that I take away from each person that I'm like, I would want my daughter to have a better this than me. Right. And
Yep.
honestly, it's vocabulary and just, I was a reader, but I wasn't an avid reader. Right. Like, I don't recall myself like, oh, I need to go to the library and get these books, right? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I wasn't the type of child. But for us, but for I was like, I'm going to the basketball court.
I know. I see your jump shot team, and you got a cold jump
Yeah.
shot.
So so for us, it was, books, but like I need your book because again, you're also an author. I forgot to even add that part, like
Yeah.
because like we read a lot of Shamory, like you're familiar with if you give the the version of this if you give a monster Bitcoin. I forgot
Yep.
the if you give I forgot
There's a couple
the
variations. They got a couple
yeah.
variations. Yeah. Yep.
So like even though she doesn't understand, like you said, she knows what Bitcoin is. She can see a Bitcoin shirt. She knows this, like anything to do with Bitcoin. I can have your shirt on, and she'll see the Bitcoin symbol. She's like, "Oh, Bitcoin, Bitcoin."
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
the funny thing is, for Satoshi, since we started off with this book, she recognizes the monsters as Satoshi,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is fine at her age. I'll take it, So it's just like, it's just different things you can do. And I think that the repetition, the consistency. We read this book so much, it was at some point we were reading it almost every night. And it's just like the consistency of that. I didn't honestly see it in the beginning. Like I was like, oh my God, we're reading, because I had a goal. And the goal was when she was first born was to read at least 5 books per day, right? And
Hmm.
some obviously we would succeed that at certain times just because you read the same book sometimes two, three times a day, especially because I'm home with her.
Yep.
And at first I didn't really notice, but then just like it came out of the blue, like her attention span. When you open up a book, she can sit there, she'll
Hmm.
listen to you, she'll go grab a book, she'll open up a book and look through it herself. She knows like different things about books, she'll look at the pictures. So I was just like, oh wow, this is working, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And at first I was like, I didn't think it was, but then just to see that it did work, I was like, okay, I can do something with this. The other group I forgot to mention was Free Market Kids. And that's the other thing too, like these three people, three groups, and even including yourself, like it's just, like I know that they're the Tuttle Twins. I think because they have the TV show, it's a little bit more popular, in the sense of like more mainstream. However, I think that it just I feel like when people who are in Bitcoin, and especially like a lot of Bitcoiners talk about family and having Bitcoin babies and things like
Yeah.
that, I think that, your books and their books and all these other books, like you would think that they're jumping off the shelves, right? But I think just like you said, as time comes and you start to get more buzzwords and people are talking about it, that they'll start to buy this stuff and it will definitely become eventually more mainstream.
100%. And there's just so much that's, yet to come. It
Hmm.
seems like we've been in this space for so long, but there's still tons of things that we haven't even discovered yet. And we're also having our kids at, they're now getting to that school age, right? Where in the next 5 years, they might actually have a class where the teacher says, hey, does anybody know what Bitcoin is? And then your
Right.
daughter's going to be ahead of the game because as soon as she hears that word, she's going to click and say, oh, me and my mom been talking about this for 7 years, 8 years, and she might be able to explain to the class what Bitcoin is while they're learning it. So she's already ahead of the curve just from being around it and being exposed to it. And there's something funny, right? So I would write a lot of articles, and I would write more for the
Hmm.
adults. And I
Yeah.
put a quote in one of my pieces. You might have read it, where I mentioned and I said, people coming from underserved communities or unbanked communities usually
Hmm.
only talk about money during two scenarios: when somebody owes them money or when they're trying to make some money. And
Yep.
it gives a negative connotation to money. And I think that that's how
Yeah.
we kind of grew up. Like, our parents are worrying about bills, or we're trying to chase somebody down for a couple dollars. So it's like you don't have a good experience with money. It's like I got to make money to work and I got to pay bills, but every time you make money, it's fleeting, right? So for our
Yeah.
kids, what I think is dope is that we're teaching them when they don't even have a concept of money. We're teaching them when
Right.
it's still fun. So they're looking at Bitcoin. They don't understand that that's money, but we can softly introduce that without them having the pressures of, worrying about
Right.
paying a bill. So I think that that's where we're going to have an advantage as parents over some of the other people that are not teaching the kids these things now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point because Maine and I even have had, in some of our videos where we talked about how the aspect of when we would talk about debt and we would talk
Mhm.
about credit, and how immediately when we would talk about credit with our families, it was like, don't use credit, credit's
Yeah.
bad, and, you get yourself in trouble and da 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 da. It was never a healthy conversations around that. But it's just like, also too, I still like, because sometimes like I think when I was thinking about like our platform and thinking about like the transition that we've had, and I'm like, those concepts are still very valid to this day.
Hmm.
People still use credit, people still get life insurance policies, people are still setting up, 529 plans, idea from you,
Yep. Yep.
that that people are using for their children, even though they're Bitcoiners. A lot of people, it's funny because a lot of Bitcoiners don't want to talk about the fiat stuff that they still use. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? It's kind of like, oh no, we can't talk about that. And it's just like, no, you're still doing it. And it's just like you can't, like if you don't have a budget and you don't have proper credit set up, then you really don't have any funds available to buy Bitcoin. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Unless you're just like, I don't care, I'm just going to buy with whatever I have. And I don't know many people who are like that. So it's just like, it's good to know that sometimes, because like I can overthink and think like, oh, it's not about being Bitcoin only. It's about being smart with your money so that you can invest more into Bitcoin to set yourself up for, a better future.
100%. And there's still, so many other aspects to it, right? We still haven't taught them about solo mining. I set up a solar miner, right? And it's small. It might, I
Mhm.
think it does like 1.2 terahash. Now we're going to get a little nerdy. So
Okay.
at some point, right, with the bid axe, my daughter will learn about that as well. And it's like, I think it's giving me like 6 cents a day or something in Satoshis, right? Which is like
Right.
nothing. But guess what? Over time, when it compounds, that's 6 cents.
Yeah.
Like I said, only $256 per person on the planet. That's still more than the average person has that's living in some third world country that can't even buy Bitcoin. That 6 cents of Bitcoin might be worth a lot to them. So
Mhm.
these are all aspects that like we can teach our kids. They're so multi-layered. You have the economic side, you have the tech side, you have the mining side. So whatever they're interested in, you can kind of pinpoint on that. Your daughter might be more interested in mining. You can go down that rabbit hole. So it's like different little things that I think are going to be
Right.
vastly important. And like you said, there's a lot of fiat tools because of right now the fiat game has been running the world for hundreds of years. So we're
Mhm.
still early in the sense of like it's not going to fully change over. You still have real estate, you still have life insurance. That's all tied to fiat into
Right.
bonds. But as time goes on, they're going to start to back these bonds with Bitcoin because they're going to realize that it's a stronger store of value over time. So
Right.
our
Right.
hopefully our kids will be
Right.
super prepared for that, and they won't be blindsided and saying like I'm not. It's like your mom and dad back in the days when they didn't want to go from the DVD to TiVo. Remember TiVo when you could record the TV? Like my mom would be
Yeah.
mad. Like I want to just screen copy my shows on a tape. I don't want to do that. I don't trust it. And then over time, now she's the most Netflixed out. You can't tell her nothing, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you know how that goes. So
Yeah.
it's gonna be the same thing for our kids. Like we're they're gonna be like their friends are gonna be like, oh, my dad said Bitcoin's a scam, and your daughter's gonna be like, well, my mom told me it was the truth, and I've been knowing about this for years. You better get with the
Right.
program.
Right. And basically giving them, the purchasing power of the dollar compared to the Bitcoin, and just over time, because you got to think about it when, as they get older, it's just, I told you in the beginning that I jumped on because of price, but it's
Hmm.
just like my evolution in Bitcoin has changed so much that I don't even care about the price. It's not
Yeah,
about the price at all. Like that's how I heard about it. But
yeah,
now it's just like it's affected everything from my eating to my health to my education, like, all areas of my life. So it's just like she's going to, break it down from a philosophical level, a financial level, an educational level, like just because I feel like that's what Bitcoin does, and it's an incredible journey.
100%. And one thing I will add too is that, and we've been saying this forever, we need more people that look like us in the space, and they're coming in for sure. But a lot of time we get into one side of the aspects, right? Like we'll just do one thing. We're all podcasters, or we're all writers, or we're all this or that. And I just think that it's beautiful to get a woman's perspective. And I always say this. I've been saying this about the Jump Out Girls since the beginning
Mhm.
of time when I met you gals. So what I find vastly important is that it has to be relatable, right? So, like I said, when I watch your show, I always think of like my female cousins that are like a few years older than
Mhm.
me. I sit on the couch and I listen to their experiences. That is
Right.
vastly important for our
Yeah.
community because those are the things that they suppress, right? And now that you're a mom, Charmaine has been a mom for a while. She has a lot of
Right.
kids and she's at
Right.
a teenager stage. So I would love, hopefully, she gets on the show too so we can hear her side of it, the
Yeah.
conversation as a parent because she has young boys that are coming of age now, and you never know, they might be the next big football star or basketball star, and
Exactly.
they got to know what they're doing when they're signing those multi-million-dollar contracts. Make sure you're reading your paperwork and making sure that you know where your money is being invested to. Don't have some manager come in and say, oh, I'll take care of this for you, you don't have to worry about it. Like, no, my mom taught me about economics, she taught me about
Mhm.
Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I want to make sure my money's invested the correct way.
Right. Yeah. No, definitely. Because yeah, main family responsibilities definitely. She has three boys, so
Hmm.
it's just like two out of three are heavily into sports. So it's just
Yep.
like her schedule is just like all over the place sometimes. And especially because her middle son, when we first started talking about Bitcoin, like we started playing the Charmaries game with him, and like that's how we taught him. And it's just like
Hmm.
it's just incredible, just because I think at the time he may have been like six,
Yeah.
yeah, like six, seven, maybe five or six, yeah. And it was just very easy to use a game to introduce Bitcoin at that particular age. So, like for you, I guess, like how has Bitcoin changed how you're raising your daughter?
100%. So how I'm raising her is, I guess you could say, unorthodox. Like I'm very, very hands on. very intentional. I don't want to say the word patriarchy, right? But I have to throw that out there because I have a daughter, right? So me being a male, I understand that this is more of a male dominated world. And what's vastly important for me is that she knows who she is and she's confident within herself, right? Whether it's
Hmm.
from economics, whether it's from social settings, all these things are important. I read somewhere that men make all the money, but ultimately, when you become married, you have a wife, the woman actually controls the finances and makes those final decisions, right? And nine times out of 10, the woman lives longer than the man does. So, whatever money you've amassed is like a
Yep.
married couple. When your husband passes, the woman
Yep.
ultimately controls that. So these are all things that I want to teach my daughter as she gets older to understand that money is a tool, and if you use it correctly, it can benefit you. But also, like if you're using a saw or a hammer, you use it wrong, it can hurt you. So these are all
Right.
things that, as
Right.
time goes on, I want to teach my daughter. And of course, it's not easy because kids don't listen. But when you tie it to, okay, you want this new thing, you want to go do gymnastics, you want to go to Disneyland, like that costs money. Let's talk about that. Let's talk
Mhm.
about money first. Let's talk about, hey, dad don't got this right now because he want to get a Bitcoin. What? Well, dad, why are
Right.
you doing
Right.
that? You're bugging. Like, talk to me, dad. What's going on? And then that's how you spark the conversation, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because it's like you're having healthy conversations and you're starting early. We're not you. We are starting early
Yep.
just with having, like you said earlier, just those healthy good conversations where it's not a negative connotation associated with money. It's
Mhm.
not a negative situation associated with the discussion. It's just, we're having these healthy, building, growing conversations where we're trying to get them to understand. And, like a lot of times, you would hear your parents or older siblings or aunties, they would say, like, oh, you're not listening. And it's just like, you are listening, like you are listening. You may not be paying attention, but you're
Yeah.
listening, So that's like kind of like the thing I've learned. And that's why I kind of still stick to the books with her, just because it's like, even when she's like running around, I'll still read. And I'm like, she hears me. She's not paying attention, but she hears me.
Yeah. Yep. And one thing I wanted to add to that too was like all the wealthy generational families, they don't approach money that
Mhm.
way, right? They don't approach money from a pressurized, stressed. It's a part of everyday life
Mhm.
for them. And I read
Yep.
something where it said, that's why I mentioned the chores and stuff. I read something where it said, if you just like make your kid do a chore and then they get money, it's like that teaches them that money is tied to like working a job or being like in a labor situation. But if you tie the chore to solving a problem, then it teaches them to be
Mhm.
problem solvers, which is what the world needs, right?
Mhm.
That's what you really get paid for, is to solve problems that people can't figure out.
Right.
So you just have to modify your chores. And then I'll say, look, you want, if she's 13 or 14, she wants to go to the movies or do whatever, you do a chore in the house. It's going to be a problem solving chore. Oh, I can't figure out how to do this. Help me do this. You get $10, whatever, $50. Now I'm gonna be slick with it. I could just give her $50 in cash. Oh, you got a cell phone now? I'm gonna send you $50 in Bitcoin. You want to
Right. Right.
spend it in fiat, figure out how to convert it, figure out, it's
Yeah.
gonna force the wheels to turn now and say, damn, my dad gave me $50. I want to spend it in cash, but he gave it to me in Bitcoin. What do I do with this?
Right.
That's how you get them. So you can start that
Yep.
earlier too, because these kids now they walk around with cell phones at 8 and 9.
I
I was
know.
15 when I got mine.
I that piece is like, I try to keep the phones away from her, but it's just like,
Hmm.
wow. I mean, you see it all the time. Like, it doesn't, one, 8 months old, like
Yeah,
they
yeah, and
already
they know
know
what to
that.
do. They already know
Yeah.
what to do with it. Yeah.
And I think also too, I read somewhere that they said that when you shouldn't ask kids, what do they want to be when they grow up. You should ask
Hmm.
kids or people, what problems do they want to solve? Like, what's
Hmm.
something you want to solve? Because it creates a different reaction from them to think about.
For sure. My daughter already said what she wanted to be though, but it might change. But she already told us, and she's been like very adamant about it. So hopefully,
Really?
yeah, she told me, she's like, I want to be a dentist. And she loves it. We got her the little fake teeth, and we, we kind of like whatever she's passionate about, we kind of like harp into that, play into it. So I
Right.
was like, hey,
Right.
if you really want to be that, like show us. So for right now, I mean, she's 5. That might change.
Yeah, yeah.
But for right now, at least for the last 2 3 years, that's what she's been saying, and like she's very big into that. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have some nice veneers when I get old. I said
Yes.
that's I still got my teeth, but you never know what's gonna happen when you get old.
And dinner work could get quite expensive too.
Listen,
Like, that's how a lot of people go to Turkey and Thailand just to get some dinner work, because it can. Oh my gosh.
yeah, and
Um,
if you have somebody in the family that could do it, that's perfect.
Yeah. We're speaking about their future. You're talking about like, what she wants to be when she grows up. So what do you hope that Bitcoin can do for your family's future?
Most definitely. So what I hope it could do for my family's future is like I kind of can see the writing on the wall here. Like, man, being a
Mhm.
millennial and just like working so hard through college and just trying to keep jobs and trying to just be the best that you can be in this world, this difficult
Yeah.
world. It's like
Right.
the last thing I want is to be, and I've noticed this now. Like, you go to Walmart and you see these old folk in there, and I'm like, that person should be retired. Like, why are they still working? And it's because
Yes.
your social security is not what you think it's going to be. If it's we might not even have it in our generation when we retire. And it's also like you're not like thinking about medical bills when you get older. Like, yeah, you're retired, but your Netflix bill's still there, your gas bill's still there, your property tax bill's still there. So you have to
Mhm.
equate all this into it. So essentially, what I hope for the future for me is that Bitcoin can be a base layer where it just covers most of my basic necessities, and then whatever I have left over in savings,
Right.
stocks, etc., then I can use that so I can pull
Mhm.
$100 out my pocket and give it to my grandkid when I get up there, and not have that be taking from my Medicaid or taking from something else. So I would recommend for people, and this is for me in the future, is that if I can get enough Bitcoin where I can just live off the interest and not even touch the principal of it, is an ultimate goal for me.
Right.
You know? Yeah.
Right. And also too, what's kind of changed since we've kind of been in the Bitcoin spaces. There's a lot more companies and products that are popping up. You know, I'm not really telling people to borrow from their Bitcoin. You know what I mean? But more of these companies are popping up. I think the longer you stay in the space, you'll see more companies. You'll get better rates because I think right now, I think they're like 16%, like Lindy and some other companies.
Yeah.
But then, like I even saw one the other day for the equity if you own a home, like you can borrow against your equity in Bitcoin. So it's just like all these different tools and traditional financial tools that exist in the fiat world are now going to exist in the Bitcoin world. And you see it happening.
100%. And like I said, only like maybe 8 to 10% of the big corporations hold Bitcoin, so they're still
Right.
trying to get that 90% to buy into their products. So that makes
Yeah.
perfect sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you ready for some rapid fire questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Bitcoin in 3 words.
In 3 words: magnificent,
Hmm.
innovative, and the future, or future.
Okay. Um, what's the first thing your child ever asked you about with like money?
Can I have some? That's the first thing she said. Can I have some? I said, what?
I love it. I love it. Snacks or sats?
What was the first one? I didn't hear it.
Snacks. Snacks.
Sats, because I'm not really a big snack person. Like, I'm not a candy person like that, so I would say Sats for sure.
Okay. All right. And then if I think I kind of already know this answer, but if your daughter could hodl anything for 10 years, what would it be?
Bitcoin.
There we
Bit
go.
Bitcoin.
That's simple. um when I think about this journey and I think about your journey, I think that she's going to have so many different things that she can tune into. She can
Mm-hmm.
read your articles, she
Yep.
can read your books, she can watch your podcasts, you know what
Yep.
I mean? So it's just like she'll have so many different angles to understand and learn about Bitcoin and be able to talk about it, so
Mm-hmm.
effectively, that you won't even realize, like at, at what age she is because she's already speaking about it now. You know what I mean?
100%.
Yeah. So Dadu, could you just tell everyone like one where they can find you? I know we mentioned, you're a man of many things, but right now, you have the Bitcoin source.
Yep. Yeah, so you can find me on multiple platforms. Twitter at underscore Dadu, my first name underscore DAWDU on Twitter. I'm pretty active on there. You
Mhm.
can find me at on YouTube at the Bitcoin Source. That's my podcast. Also, you can go to the BTCsource.com. That's my website for my podcast. I'm still doing writing. I've fallen back from writing because I'm doing so many different things right now, but I'm gonna get back into the
Yeah.
writing space. I'm just trying to find a good angle to do it because there's so much information out there now that it's like, how do I make myself different from what's already out there? But
Yeah, yeah, true.
those are the main platforms that you can find me on. I'm trying to think if there's anything that
Okay.
I'm missing here. I think that's it. Yeah. So
Um,
Twitter,
yeah.
my podcast. Yeah, I think that's it for now. Yep.
What about Medium? Aren't you on Medium?
Yeah, I'm
But
on
you're not
Medium
writing
too.
as much right now.
Yeah, I'm on Medium too.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can find me on Medium at Daru, Dawdu as well. What else? Oh, I got books on Amazon. So just put in my
Yes.
name in
Yes.
Amazon. I have Stack and Sass is the New Black. What else do I have on there? I have the Bit on Digital Coins. I got a couple books that I've written, so please check those out as well.
Yeah, and we'll link all those in below, in the caption below. So Dadu, if your daughter were to watch this video at an older age, what's a message that you would want to leave for her?
At an older age, I would say stay true to yourself, learn everything you
Hmm.
can about the world, and invest in the right things so that they can be a benefit for you when you're older and you can't, work as hard.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We truly appreciate you. This was such an honor. It's, very surreal. I can't believe we did this. But thank you so much. And, we out.
Let me tell
Thank you,
you
Tina.
exactly what you'll get when you subscribe to Raising Satoshi. Real parents, real educators, just everyday people figuring things out. Raising Satoshi, building a better future.